All right, folks, buckle up and grab your favorite drink because we're back with another episode of the Drunken Zombies podcast. You know how it is. Another day, another delightfully dreadful zombie scenario. Today we're going to be talking about a very particular kind of outbreak. You ready for this? Zombie knights. Like full-on armored medieval knights.
Oh, yeah. You had me at Medieval Mayhem, Adrian. I'm Julia, by the way, and I'm so ready to geek out with you on this one. Zombies plus history. It's like peanut butter and chocolate, but, with more blood and guts.
Exactly. And what's awesome is that we've got these snippets from this story called Knights of the Living Dead and, of course, our trusty zombiesguide.pdf to kind of guide our investigation. So basically, the story takes place at this medieval reenactment fair, right? And boom, zombie outbreak hits. But it's not just your average shambling horde. It's the knights themselves who come back as these armored undead warriors. So what we're going to do today is see how this story really mixes up historical elements with that classic zombie horror that we all know and love. And, maybe, just maybe, we can pick up some survival tips along the way.
So think about it. You're at this fair, having a good time, checking out the jousting and whatnot, and suddenly the guys in shining armor are actually trying to bite your head off. I mean,
Right.
talk about a total nightmare scenario, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's like your history textbook coming to life in the worst way possible.
Mm-hmm.
So let's dive into this. We've got to talk about these armored zombies, right? It sounds almost comical at first, like zombies in armor. Really?
Yeah.
But the story, Knights of the Living Dead, doesn't mess around. It makes it super creepy. And the main character, Alex, he's a history teacher, so he's totally in his element at this fair, right?
Mm-hmm.
Little does he know, his passion for history is going to backfire in the most terrifying way imaginable.
Right, and that's what makes the story so cool. It's not just mindless zombies. It's like these guys were knights, skilled warriors in their past lives, and now some of those skills, some of that training might still be there, even in death. Imagine trying to fight off a zombie who knows how to wield a sword. Talk about terrifying.
Seriously, like you're used to aiming for the head. Right, but these guys are wearing helmets. You try smashing through a medieval helmet with a baseball bat. Let me know how that works out for you. There's this part of the story, Alex is looking at his replica sword, and it just hits him that this fake weapon, would be totally useless against a real armored zombie. It makes you think, right, like, are we ever really prepared for something this out there?
Yeah, exactly. Like all those zombie survival tips, headshot, outrun them. Well, none of that really applies when you're dealing with an undead knight in full plate armor. So the survivors in the story, and maybe this is a lesson for us too, they have to think outside the box.
Exactly. They have to get creative and resourceful, right? Like they start using their knowledge of the fairgrounds, the layout, where things are to their advantage. And then there's this blacksmith there, Thomas. His skills become super valuable.
Yeah.
It's like suddenly knowing how to forge a weapon is the most important skill in the world. It just shows you in a crazy situation like this, you never know what kind of knowledge or skill might come in handy.
Totally. And, it goes back to the zombiesguide.pdf we always talk about, that thing about making a plan, right? In the story, they try barricading themselves in, but it doesn't really work because, well, armored zombies. So they have to adapt, think on their feet, turn the whole fairground into this giant makeshift fortress.
I love that, turning the fairground into a fortress. It's like suddenly those medieval castle defenses, the moats and drawbridges, all that stuff, it's actually relevant in a zombie apocalypse. It's crazy.
And remember, those knights probably knew a thing or two about how to attack a castle, too. You can't forget that part.
Oh, man, that's a good point. It's like their historical knowledge is both a blessing and a curse in this situation, right? And speaking of knowledge, that brings us to our next takeaway, right? This whole idea that knowledge, even seemingly useless knowledge, can be a lifesaver. There's this scene, Jamie, one of the survivors, he finds this old manuscript on a dead zombie knight, and it turns out to be about ancient diseases. Who knew that ancient diseases would be relevant to a zombie apocalypse, right?
Right. It just shows you, you never know what kind of information is going to be useful. I always say, be the zombie investigator. Right. Always look for explanations, even in the craziest situations. And in this case, this old book about plagues might actually hold the key to stopping this whole armored zombie thing.
Like, what if it's some ancient plague that's bringing these knights back to life? It's creepy, but also kind of cool to think that something from history could be the answer to this crazy problem, right?
Yeah.
It's a reminder that we should never underestimate the power of knowledge, even if it seems completely random at first.
Yeah, it's like you might think history is boring, but what if knowing about some obscure plague is what saves you from a zombie night?
Exactly. It makes you want to go hit the library. Right?
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've talked about armored zombies. We've talked about resourcefulness, and the power of knowledge. Now let's get to the fun part, the action. What's so awesome about Nights of the Living Dead is that it's not just your typical slow-moving zombie horror. It's got these epic medieval battle scenes, but with zombies. The fairgrounds, this place meant for fun and games, becomes this terrifying battlefield. Can you imagine?
Oh, it's brilliant. You have the jousting area, the archery range, all these places meant for entertainment, and now it's like life or death. And the sounds, imagine the clashing of armor, but it's not a fun show anymore. It's the sound of the undead coming to get you.
It's like turning a Renaissance fair into a horror movie.
Yeah.
And it's totally in line with that Zombies Guide idea that every good zombie story is like a mini-movie, right?
Yeah.
With rising action and a huge epic climax.
Right. The story does a really great job of building up the tension. It starts with these little signs like people feeling sick and then bam, full-blown chaos. And the fights, they're not just mindless brawls. These zombies were trained knights, remember? So every fight is a struggle, a desperate fight for survival.
It's so intense. And the story ends with this cliffhanger, like there might be something even bigger, even more ancient behind this whole outbreak. So it really makes you wonder, what other historical stuff like lost texts or ancient legends could be connected to the zombie apocalypse? It's like, what other crazy scenarios are out there just waiting to be unleashed?
I know, right? It really makes you think about zombies in a whole new way. Like, we always imagine zombies in a modern setting, but what about zombies in ancient Rome or feudal Japan? What would that be like? And what kind of knowledge or weapons would people from those times have to fight them off?
Mind blown, Julie. I never thought of that. Like, what if those ancient myths about monsters and curses, what if those are based on real zombie encounters? And what if those old stories hold the key to surviving something like this in the future? That's a whole new level of zombie apocalypse to think about.
And it just goes to show, when it comes to zombies, you got to be prepared for anything.
That's the truth. Well, folks, there you have it, our deep dive into the terrifying world of Nights of the Living Dead. Big thanks to Julia for joining me on this crazy ride.
Anytime, Adrian. Always a blast talking zombies with you.
And for all you brave listeners out there, thank you for tuning in to the Drunken Zombies Podcast. We've got so many more zombie stories to share, so make sure you hit that subscribe button and stay tuned for our next episode. And hey, in the meantime, maybe brush up on your sword fighting skills. Just in case those zombie knights decide to pay us a visit.